My stepfather once looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You got her strength, and her stubborn heart." I thought he was only talking about my mother, but in that moment, I realized he was really seeing me. It's strange how silence can be heavier than noise. In our house, the quiet felt like an extra person sitting with us, one we couldn't ignore. At 23, I had grown used to filling the silence in my head with old memories of my mother, her laugh at the breakfast table, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was deep in thought, the soft hum she always carried when cooking. But those were echoes, fading more each year, and all that was left in the present was me, my stepfather, and the stillness between us. He wasn't a bad man, not by any stretch. Mid-30s, calm, composed, the kind of person who spoke little but always seemed to notice everything. He had married my mother late in her life, after years of her raising me alone. By the time he stepped into our home, I was already grown enough to see him not as a father but as an outsider trying too hard to belong. When she passed, the thread that tied us frayed. We were left standing on opposite sides of the same room, bound by grief yet divided by it, too. Dinner time was the hardest. The clink of cutlery against plates was sharper than it should have been. We ate across from each other like strangers at a diner counter. Sometimes I caught him staring at the empty chair that once held her. His gaze was not cold but unbearably tender, as if he were trying to conjure her back into being. And maybe that's what hurt me most, seeing in him the same longing I carried but couldn't admit. One evening, I walked past him in the hallway. I had planned to slip by without a word, but as I brushed past, I felt the sudden weight of his hand on my shoulder. Not tight, not commanding, just steady. His palm was warm, grounding in a way I hadn't expected. He didn't say anything, and neither did I. Yet the touch stayed with me, replaying over and over in my mind long after I shut my bedroom door. It was the first time I realized he wasn't trying to replace her, or even to claim a role he couldn't possibly fill. He was simply there. And in the silence of that house, being there meant more than I wanted to admit. The first time he compared me to her, it caught me off guard. It was raining that evening, a steady drizzle tapping against the living room window. The kind of rain that makes everything quieter, as if the world outside had dimmed its voice. I sat on the couch with my arms crossed, stubbornly holding my ground after a small disagreement about fixing the leaky faucet. I had insisted I could handle it, that I didn't need help, but he had stepped in with his usual calm, offering tools and suggestions that only irritated me more. "You don't have to take over everything," I muttered, sharper than I intended. My words cut through the room, a crack in the quiet. He didn't flinch. He just looked at me for a long moment, his eyes steady but softened, as though he were searching for something in my face. Then he said it, voice low and unhurried, "You got her strength, and her stubborn heart." The sentence landed heavier than I expected. It wasn't criticism, it was recognition. And somehow that unsettled me more. I turned my face away, staring at the blurred streetlights through the rain-washed glass. My chest tightened with something unnameable. Hearing him say those words felt like he'd reached into a part of me I thought was untouchable, a part that belonged only to my mother. The air in the room grew heavier, though not with anger. I could hear the faint creak of the couch as he shifted, moving to sit closer. Not too close, but enough that I could feel his presence at my side. His voice dropped, quieter than the rain. "She'd fight me on everything, you know. Even when she knew I was right," he said, almost smiling at the memory. "But she never gave up. She never backed down. I see that in you, every day." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat felt thick, words caught between pride and pain. I wanted to push back, to tell him he didn't have the right to compare me to her. Yet another part of me, one I couldn't deny, felt the warmth in his tone, the way he meant it not as judgment but as truth. When I finally dared to glance at him, he wasn't watching the window or the rain. He was watching me. His gaze wasn't heavy, but it lingered, calm and unwavering. In that moment, I realized he wasn't trying to win an argument. He was trying to see me, and to let me know he already did. In the days that followed, something subtle shifted between us. It wasn't dramatic, no sudden flood of words, no obvious declaration. Just the quiet ways our paths began to overlap. It started in the garage. The old dining table, scarred from years of use, wobbled badly, one leg loose. I had always meant to fix it, but never found the patience. He brought it up one morning over coffee, his tone casual. "If you've got time later, maybe we can take a look at that table." At first, I wanted to refuse. Pride whispered in my ear, reminding me that I didn't need his help. But something about the way he said we disarmed me. So later that day, we found ourselves side by side, kneeling on the concrete floor with tools scattered between us. The smell of sawdust filled the air, sharp and earthy, mixing with the faint scent of oil from the shelves. Every sound felt amplified, the rasp of sandpaper, the creak of the wood, the occasional scrape of our arms brushing as we reached for the same wrench. Each accidental touch sparked something quiet but undeniable, lingering in the space between us long after the contact was gone. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was never about the task at hand. Instead, he asked me about my work, about the things I wanted to do, about memories of my mother that I hadn't shared in years. His voice was steady, low, never pressing too hard, just open enough for me to step into if I chose. I surprised myself by answering. I told him how she used to sing while setting the table, how she'd insist on doing things her way even when it made no sense, how stubbornness ran in our blood like a family curse. Each story made him smile faintly, not the forced politeness I'd once accused him of, but something genuine, like he was grateful for the pieces of her I was handing him. By the time we tightened the last bolt and the table stood firm again, I realized the silence between us had changed. It no longer felt like a wall. It felt like a pause in a conversation, waiting to be picked up again. As we stood, his arm brushed against mine once more. This time, neither of us pulled away. He only gave a quiet nod, a small acknowledgement. And though nothing had been said aloud, I knew a bridge had been built, fragile, but real. It was close to midnight when I found him in the kitchen. The house was dark, save for the pale glow spilling from the open refrigerator door. He stood there in silence, one hand resting on the fridge handle, the other holding a glass of water. For a moment, he looked almost fragile, as if the weight he carried pressed more heavily on him when no one else was supposed to see. I had come down for the same reason, sleeplessness. My chest felt heavy that night, memories of her pressing against me harder than usual. I thought I would just grab a drink, slip back upstairs, and bury myself under the covers. But seeing him there, shoulders faintly hunched, changed something in me. "You can't sleep either?" I asked quietly. He closed the fridge, leaving only the soft hum of the appliance and the steady ticking of the wall clock. He set the glass down on the counter, glanced at me, then nodded. "Not most nights," he admitted, voice roughened by fatigue. We sat at the small table, a dim bulb above us casting a tired circle of light. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't hostile anymore, but it was heavy, full of words waiting to be said. Finally, he broke it. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living in her shadow," he murmured. "Like no matter what I do, I'm just standing where she should still be." The word startled me. I had always imagined him as steady, unshakable. Hearing his vulnerability opened something inside me. I stared at my hands, fingers tracing the grain of the wooden table. "I resented you," I admitted, my voice low. "I thought you were trying to take her place. Trying to take my place in her life." He shook his head slowly. "I could never replace her. And I never wanted to replace you." The honesty in his voice cut deeper than I expected. My throat burned, but before I could find an answer, I felt his hand settle on my forearm. Warm. Gentle. Not demanding, not insistent, just there, steady as an anchor. I should have pulled away. I didn't. The warmth of his touch spread through me, filling places that had been cold for too long. When I lifted my eyes to meet his, he was already looking at me, not with pity, not with guilt, but with something deeper. The clock ticked, the house stayed silent, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel entirely alone. After that night in the kitchen, our days seemed to take on a different shape. It wasn't that we suddenly became comfortable or that the silence disappeared, it was that the silence softened. There was a gentleness to it now, a space that didn't feel empty but waiting. I noticed it most in the small routines. Grocery shopping, something I used to rush through alone, became slower with him. We would walk the aisles together, pushing the cart side by side. Sometimes our arms brushed as we reached for the same item, and neither of us apologized. Other times, he'd ask what I preferred, like he was relearning me piece by piece, though he never made it obvious. Cooking together was new. He wasn't a natural in the kitchen, and I teased him for it. But he stayed anyway, chopping vegetables unevenly while I stirred the pan. The aroma of garlic and herbs filled the air, curling around us like something intimate. Once, while I was bent over the pot, strands of hair fell into my eyes. Without thinking, he reached across and brushed them back with the back of his fingers. The gesture was so simple, so casual, yet it sent a rush of heat to my face. I laughed it off, but inside my heart was racing. It was the same on our walks. Autumn had painted the streets gold and red, leaves crunching under our shoes. We walked without destination, just matching steps, sometimes talking, sometimes not. But in the quiet, I could feel the weight of his presence next to me, steady and grounding. Every now and then, our hands would swing too close, fingers almost grazing. The space between us seemed smaller each time. And yet, even as these moments unfolded, a part of me resisted. At night, lying awake, I told myself this was dangerous, that what I was feeling wasn't allowed. He was older, tied to my mother by vows and memory, a man I had once tried to keep at a distance. But in the daylight, when his laugh slipped out unguarded or when his shoulder brushed mine just a little too long, my resolve cracked. He didn't press. He didn't name what hovered between us. He only kept showing up, in the kitchen, on the walks, in the quiet. And maybe that was why it unsettled me most. Because the more he was there, the harder it became to imagine a life without him. The night it all cracked open, the storm outside matched the one inside me. Rain battered against the windows, thunder rolling through the walls like an uninvited guest. I had been pacing in the living room, restless, while he sat in the armchair, watching me with that steady calm of his that only made me angrier. "Why do you keep doing this?" I demanded suddenly. My voice was louder than I meant, trembling at the edges. "Why do you keep being here? Acting like it's fine, like none of this is strange." He didn't move at first. Just leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, studying me as though he was weighing every word before it left his mouth. "Because," he said softly, "I promised her I'd look after you. That's not what this is." I snapped. My chest felt too tight, every breath strained. "You're not just looking after me. Don't pretend you don't feel it too." The silence that followed was brutal. The rain hammered harder, the room alive with the storm's pulse. He finally stood, closing the distance between us. His voice, when it came, was raw. "You think I don't fight myself every day? You think I don't know how wrong it should be? But I can't." He shook his head, his breath uneven. "I can't make myself stop caring about you more than I should." The words hit me harder than thunder. My hands curled into fists, not from anger but from the fear of admitting I felt the same. "And what are we supposed to do with that?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Pretend it doesn't exist? Tear each other apart trying to deny it?" His expression wavered, pain and longing colliding in his eyes. "I don't know," he whispered. "All I know is that I can't lose you too." The storm outside roared, lightning flashing white across his face. And in that moment, everything in me split open. I wanted to run, to push him away, to protect us both from what the world would say. But I couldn't move. Not when he reached for my hand and gripped it with a force that spoke more than words ever could. His hand was warm, trembling, but he didn't let go. And I didn't pull away. Between the thunder and silence, we stood there, two people on the edge of something neither of us knew how to name. The storm broke by morning. Sunlight slipped gently through the curtains, turning the living room into a softer place than it had been the night before. The house smelled faintly of rain-soaked earth, fresh and new, as if the world had been rinsed clean. I woke early, unable to shake the memory of his hand gripping mine through the thunder. The warmth of it still lingered in my skin. For once, I didn't feel the urge to run from the thought. Instead, I sat in the quiet and let myself feel what I'd been denying for so long. He entered the room a little later, hair damp from a shower, clothes plain and comfortable. When his eyes met mine, there was no pretension, no shield, only the exhaustion of someone who had carried too much and finally set it down. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he crossed the room and lowered himself onto the couch beside me. Not close enough to overwhelm, but near enough that I could sense the steady weight of his presence. The silence between us was different now, not a wall, not even a pause. It was a quiet that belonged to people who had finally stopped pretending. "I don't know what comes next," I admitted, my voice low. "I don't even know what this is supposed to be." He exhaled, his shoulders easing as though he had been holding his breath all night. "We don't have to name it," he said. "We don't have to explain it to anyone. All we need to do is, be honest with each other. That's enough." The simplicity of his words settled into me like warmth spreading through cold bones. No grand declarations, no impossible promises, just honesty. Just presence. When he finally reached for me, it wasn't rushed or hesitant. His arm slid around my shoulders, drawing me against him in a full embrace. His cheek rested lightly against my hair, steady and grounding. For the first time, I didn't resist. I let myself lean into him, my head against his chest, listening to the quiet rhythm of his heartbeat. It wasn't the kind of family I had ever expected. It wasn't the one the world would understand. But in that moment, wrapped in his arms, I realized it was ours, something fragile, something real, and something worth holding on to. And for the first time since she was gone, I didn't feel like I was living in her shadow. I felt like I had stepped into my own light.